The slave auction on Nexus Station was the largest in the known galaxy, and tonight it held a prize that had drawn buyers from 1,000 worlds. Commander Vera Calthine stood on the platform with her wrists bound in energy chains, her golden scales catching the harsh lights above her head, and her 4 eyes burning with a hatred so fierce that several buyers in the front row took a step backward. She was 7 feet of predatory grace, with claws that could tear through ship armor and a reputation that had made entire fleets surrender rather than face her in battle. But now she was merchandise. The Valkyrie Empire had lost the border wars against humanity, and the price of peace had been steep. The Empire had been forced to pay massive debts to the Galactic Council, and when the treasury ran empty, they had begun selling their own. Plavera had been the perfect sacrifice. She was a war hero who had become a symbol of failure, a commander who had won 100 battles but lost the war, a proud warrior who could be humbled to show the galaxy that the Valkyrie had truly been broken. The auctioneer, a fat creature with 6 arms and no sense of shame, waved at her like she was a piece of furniture. Behold the butcher of Carvax Prime. He shouted to the crowd, the woman who burned the human colony worlds, who killed 50,000 of their soldiers, who made the stars themselves weep with her cruelty. Vera did not flinch at the words. They were true. After all, she had done terrible things during the war, and she had done them well. That was what soldiers did, and she had been the best soldier her empire had ever produced. The bidding started high and climbed higher. A crime lord from the Syndicate worlds wanted her as a bodyguard and bed slave. His bid was 3 million credits. An admiral from the human navy wanted her as a prisoner to be displayed and humiliated. His bid was 5 million credits. A Valkyrie Duke, who had been her rival for decades, wanted her as a trophy to prove his superiority. His bid was 8 million credits. Vera watched them all with cold contempt. These creatures thought they could own her, thought they could break her, thought that chains and credits could somehow diminish what she was. They were fools. But then a new voice cut through the auction hall, and everything changed. 10 million credits. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at the speaker. And Vera felt something strange stir in her chest when she saw him. He was human, not a military officer in a crisp uniform, not a politician surrounded by guards, just a man in a worn jacket standing alone near the back of the room. He was average height for his species, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes the color of Earth's oceans. He looked tired, like someone who had seen too much of the universe and found most of it disappointing. The auctioneer laughed nervously. Sir, the bidding is for serious buyers only, and I must ask you to provide proof of funds before. The human held up a credit chip, and the auctioneer's scanner beeped loudly enough for the whole room to hear. Verified, the auctioneer said, his voice now shaking slightly. The bid is 10 million credits from the human gentleman. The crime lord raised his hand. 12 million. 15. The human said without hesitation. The admiral stood up angrily. 20 million, and I demand to know who this man is. My name is Marcus Cole, the human replied calmly, captain of the independent vessel Endurance, and my bid is 25 million credits. Vera stared at him with growing confusion. She knew that name, knew it from intelligence reports. During the war, Marcus Cole had been a nobody, a cargo ship captain who had somehow survived 3 encounters with Valkyrie raiders, who had rescued civilians from burning colonies, who had once rammed his own ship into an enemy cruiser to save a hospital station. He was not rich. He was not powerful. He was just a human who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time and had refused to die. So how could he afford to bid on her? And more importantly, why would he want to? The Valkyrie Duke rose from his seat with fury in his eyes. 30 million credits, and I warn you, human, do not test my patience further. Marcus looked at the Duke with an expression that might have been amusement, 40 million, the crowd gasped. That was more money than most planets generated in a year. More than any slave had ever sold for in the history of the station. The Duke's face turned dark with rage, but before he could speak, his advisor whispered something in his ear. Whatever was said made the Duke sit down slowly, his hands shaking. With suppressed anger, the bid stands at 40 million credits. The auctioneer announced, his voice barely above a whisper now. Are there any other bids? Silence filled the hall, going once. Vera watched Marcus Cole with new eyes. This human had just spent a fortune that could have bought him a fleet of ships, a planet of his own, a lifetime of luxury and comfort, and he had spent it on her, going twice. What did he want from her? Revenge for the colonies she had burned. A trophy to show his human friends. A slave to torture until his hatred was satisfied. She had killed his people by the thousands. She had ordered the bombardment of civilian targets. She had shown no mercy during the war because mercy was weakness and weakness meant death. Whatever this human wanted from her, it could not be good. Sold to Captain Marcus Cole for 40 million credits. The crowd erupted in whispers as guards moved to escort Vera off the platform. But she kept her eyes fixed on the human who had purchased her fate. He walked toward her slowly, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable when he reached her. He looked up at her towering form and said only 4 words. Come with me, Commander. Vera could have fought. Even with her hands bound, she could have killed a dozen guards before they brought her down. But something in his voice made her pause. Something that was not fear or hatred or greed. It almost sounded like respect. She followed him out of the auction hall, past the staring crowds and the angry bidders and the whispered speculation. Into the cold corridors of Nexus Station, they walked. In silence until they reached a docking bay where a battered frigate waited. Its hull scarred with old battle damage and its name painted in faded letters. HFY Endurance Marcus stopped at the boarding ramp and turned to face her. I know what you are thinking, he said quietly. You are thinking about all the ways you could kill me, about all the reasons I must have bought you, about all the terrible things I must be planning. Vera said nothing. Her silence was confirmation enough. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. With a click, her energy chains fell away, and she was free. She stared at him in shock. What is this? I do not believe in slavery, Marcus said simply. Never have, never will. The chains are gone, and you are not my property. Then what am I? Vera demanded, her voice harsh with confusion. Why did you spend 40 million credits on me, if not to own me? Marcus smiled then, and it was the strangest smile she had ever seen. It held no malice, no cruelty, no hidden agenda. It was just warmth. You are my guest, Commander Calthine, he said. And I bought you because no one deserves to be sold like cargo, not even someone who has done the things you have done. He turned and walked up the ramp into his ship, leaving her standing alone in the docking bay with her freedom and her confusion and a single, impossible question. Why would a human, of all creatures in the galaxy, show mercy to the woman who had burned his worlds? Vera looked at the cold stars beyond the station windows. Then at the open door of the Endurance. She had no home, no fleet, no purpose. Her empire had betrayed her, her people had sold her, and her honor was dust. But this human had offered her something she had never expected. A choice. After a long moment, Commander Vera Calthine walked up the ramp and into the unknown. The first week aboard the Endurance was the most confusing time of Vera's entire life. She had expected punishment. She received kindness. She had expected chains. She received freedom. She had expected hatred. She received something far more terrifying. She received respect. Marcus gave her a private cabin with a real bed and a window that looked out at the stars. It was small by Velkari standards, but it was clean and warm, and hers. No one watched her through cameras. No one locked her door at night. No one came to remind her that she was property. She was simply a passenger on a ship full of humans who did not seem to know what to do with her. Crew of the Endurance numbered 23 souls, and every single one of them had lost someone to the border wars. Vera could see it in their eyes when they looked at her. The pain and the anger and the memory of fire falling from the sky. She had expected them to attack her, to corner her in some dark corridor and take their revenge with fists and knives. Instead, they avoided her. They gave her space, stepped aside when she walked past, answered her questions with short words and shorter glances. They did not forgive her, and she did not expect them to, but they did not harm her either. It made no sense. On the fifth day, Vera finally confronted Marcus in the ship's small mess hall. He was eating something called scrambled eggs, and he looked up at her with that same unreadable expression he always wore. "I need to understand," she said, standing over him like a predator over prey. "Why do your people not attack me? Why do they not take revenge for what I have done?" Marcus set down his fork and thought for a moment before answering. "Because I asked them not to," he said simply, "and they obey you. Even with their hatred, even with their grief, they obey you?" "They trust me," Marcus corrected. "There is a difference. I told them you were under my protection, and they respect that, even if they do not like it." Vera sat down across from him, her confusion growing. In the Valkyrie Empire, a commander who showed mercy to an enemy would be executed for weakness. How can you lead if you are not feared? Marcus laughed softly, and the sound startled her. Humans tried ruling through fear for thousands of years, and it never worked for long. The empires built on fear always crumble, always fall, always end in blood and ash. He pushed a cup of something hot and dark across the table toward her. "Coffee, try it." Vera looked at the cup suspiciously. "Is it poison?" "If I wanted to poison you, I would use something that does not smell this good." She took a careful sip and found the taste strange but not unpleasant. It was bitter and warm and somehow comforting. "We learned," Marcus continued, "that people fight harder for leaders they love than for leaders they fear. Fear makes soldiers run when the battle turns against them, but love makes them stand and die for each other." "That is foolish," Vera said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But it is also why we won the war." Vera had no answer for that. The Valkyrie had been stronger, more numerous, more advanced in every way. And yet they had lost to these soft-skinned creatures who valued love over fear. She spent the next few days watching the humans more carefully. Trying to understand them, she saw how they touched each other constantly. A hand on a shoulder, a pat on the back, an embrace between friends. Physical contact that would be considered inappropriate or even threatening among her people was normal and welcome here. She saw how they laughed together, even at terrible jokes that made no sense. They found joy in small things, in shared meals, in old music and stories about home. She saw how they mourned their dead, not with stoic silence like the Valkyrie, but with tears and words and memories spoken aloud. They celebrated the lives that were gone instead of pretending those lives had never existed, and she saw how Marcus led them. He did not shout or threaten or demand obedience. He asked, he suggested, he listened. When a crew member disagreed with him, he did not punish them for insubordination, but instead discussed the matter until they reached an understanding. It was the strangest form of leadership Vera had ever witnessed. And somehow it worked. One evening, she found herself alone with Marcus in the observation deck, watching a nebula drift past like a cloud of colored fire. "I have a question," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Ask it. You spent 40 million credits on me. That is more money than your ship is worth, more than you could earn in a lifetime. Where did it come from?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I called in every favor I was owed. I sold everything I had. I borrowed from friends who could not afford to lend. I emptied accounts that were meant for retirement and emergencies and rainy days. Vera stared at him in disbelief. You destroyed yourself financially to purchase someone you do not even know. Why? Because I was at Carvax Prime, Marcus said softly, and his voice carried the weight of old pain. I was there when the bombs fell, when the cities burned, when 70,000 civilians died in a single night. Vera felt something cold settle in her chest. Carvax Prime had been her greatest victory, the battle that had made her famous. The moment when she had proven herself the most ruthless commander in the Valkyrie fleet. I pulled survivors from the rubble for 3 days, Marcus continued. Children mostly. So many children. I still hear them screaming sometimes. When I try to sleep, then you should hate me most of all, Vera said, her voice barely above a whisper. You should want me dead more than anyone. Marcus turned to look at her, and his eyes held no hatred, only something that looked like sadness. I did hate you, he admitted. For years, I dreamed about finding you and making you pay for what you did. I imagined 1,000 different ways to hurt you, to make you suffer like those children suffered. What changed? I got tired, Marcus said simply. Hatred is exhausting. It eats you from the inside, takes everything good and turns it rotten. I spent so long hating you that I forgot how to be anything else. He looked back at the nebula, its colors painting his face in shades of red and gold. Then I heard you were being sold, and I realized I had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life hating a woman I had never met, or I could try something different. Different how? I could try to understand, Marcus said. Not forgive, because I do not think I can do that. Not yet. But understand. I want to know who you are, Commander. I want to know if you are a monster or just a soldier who followed orders. I want to know if there is something inside you worth saving. Vera felt tears burning in her eyes, and she turned away quickly so he would not see. Valkyrie did not cry, did not show weakness, did not feel things like this, but somehow, this impossible human had reached inside her and found something she had buried long ago. I was a monster, she said finally, her voice cracking. I gave the orders. I watched the bombs fall. I felt nothing but satisfaction when the cities burned. And now? Now I do not know what I am. Marcus reached out and placed his hand on her arm. A gesture of comfort that should have felt wrong, but instead felt like the first warm touch she had experienced in decades. Then, we will figure it out together, he said, and for the first time in her long and bloody life, Commander Vera Calthine allowed herself to hope. The attack came 3 weeks after Vera boarded the Endurance, and it came without warning. The ship was passing through the hollow expanse, a region of empty space between major trade routes. When the sensors screamed to life with proximity alerts, 3 Valkyrie warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons already charging, their hulls painted with the colors of the Imperial executioners. Vera's blood turned to ice when she saw them. The executioners were not soldiers. They were hunters who specialized in tracking down traitors and enemies of the Empire. They had never failed to kill a target in over 300 years of service. All hands to battle stations, Marcus announced calmly over the ship's speakers. We have company. Vera ran to the bridge and found Marcus already in his command chair, his crew working frantically at their stations. On the main screen, the 3 enemy ships loomed like predators suckling wounded prey. They are here for me, Vera said. If you surrender me to them, they will let you go. Marcus did not even look at her. No, you do not understand. These are executioners. They will destroy this ship and everyone on it just to kill me. Your crew will die for nothing. Now Marcus turned, and his eyes held something fierce and stubborn that she had never seen before. I said no. You are under my protection, and that means something. A communication signal flashed on the console. and Marcus opened the channel. The face that appeared on screen was familiar to Vera. Admiral Kethvorin, a man she had served with decades ago. A man who had always hated her for rising higher than him. Human vessel, Kethvorin said with cold contempt. You are harboring the war criminal Vera Calthine. Surrender her to us immediately, and we will allow you to leave with your lives. She is not a criminal, Marcus replied evenly. She is a guest on my ship, and she is not going anywhere. Kethvorin laughed. Guest? How amusing. Do you know what that woman has done? Do you know how many of your own people she has killed? I know exactly what she has done. My answer is still no. Then you are a fool, and you will die a fool's death. Prepare to be destroyed. The channel closed, and the 3 warships began to advance. Vera grabbed Marcus by the shoulder. Listen to me carefully. Your ship has no chance against even one of those destroyers. They have superior weapons, superior shields, superior everything. This is suicide? Maybe, Marcus said with a slight smile. But humans are very good at suicide missions. He turned to his crew. Elena, get us into that asteroid field. James, divert all power to engines and forward shields. Chun, prepare the cargo shuttles for remote operation. The cargo shuttles? Mara asked in confusion. What can cargo shuttles do against warships? You will see. The Endurance surged forward, racing toward a dense field of asteroids that floated nearby. The Valkyrie ships pursued immediately, firing their weapons in bright streams of deadly energy. The first shots missed as the Endurance twisted and dodged, using the asteroids as cover. Marcus flew like a man possessed, threading his ship through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, using the rocks as shields against enemy fire. They are splitting up, Elena reported. One ship is going around the field to cut us off. The other 2 are following us in. Perfect, Marcus said. That is exactly what I wanted. Chun, launch Shuttle 1 toward the flanking ship. Program it for collision course. Sir, the shuttle is loaded with mining explosives. I know. Vera watched in amazement as a small cargo shuttle launched from the Endurance and accelerated toward the Valkyrie ship that was trying to circle around them. The shuttle was tiny compared to the warship, barely a speck on the sensors. The Valkyrie captain did not even bother shooting it down. Why would he? It was just a shuttle, harmless and insignificant. He realized his mistake too late. The shuttle hit the destroyer's engine section and detonated with the force of a small sun. The mining explosives designed to break apart asteroids tore through the warship's armor like paper. The first Valkyrie ship died in a ball of fire, and Vera felt her heart racing with disbelief. 1 down, Marcus said grimly. 2 to go. The remaining ships were more cautious now, staying farther back and using their superior range to fire at the Endurance from a distance. The human ship's shields flickered and groaned under the assault. Shields at 40%, James reported. We cannot take much more of this. Then we will not take it, Marcus replied. Elena, bring us around that large asteroid. James, on my mark, I want you to vent atmosphere from the port side. Vent atmosphere. That will look like we are dying. That is the point. The Endurance swung around a massive rock, momentarily breaking the enemy's line of sight. When the Valkyrie ships came around the asteroid, they saw the human vessel tumbling through space with gas streaming from its hull. They are venting. One of Vera's former officers would be reporting right now. Hull breach on their port side. They are finished. The 2 destroyers moved in for the kill, eager to claim the glory of destroying the ship that had humiliated them. They got close enough to see the faces of the humans through the bridge windows. That was when Marcus shouted, "Now!" And the Endurance stopped tumbling, brought all weapons to bear, and fired everything it had directly into the lead destroyer's bridge, the Valkyrie. Ship shields were designed to protect against long-range combat. At point-blank range, They could not stop the concentrated fury of every weapon the Endurance possessed. Second destroyer died with its admiral still screaming orders. The third ship, now alone and facing a human crew that had just killed two of its companions through sheer insanity, made the wise decision to run it, jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled, broadcasting warnings about the mad humans who fought like cornered animals and turned cargo shuttles into weapons of mass destruction on the bridge of the Endurance. The crew erupted in cheers. They had won, against all odds, against all logic, against an enemy that should have destroyed them. But the celebration was short-lived. "Captain," Elena said urgently. "Marcus, you are hurt." Vera turned and saw Marcus slumped in his chair, blood soaking through his jacket from a wound in his side. During the battle, debris from a console explosion had struck him, and he had said nothing, given no sign of pain. "Just kept fighting. It is nothing," Marcus said weakly. "Just a scratch." "That is not a scratch," Vera said, rushing to his side. "That is a piece of metal in your ribs. You need a doctor now." The crew carried Marcus to the medical bay, and Vera followed, her mind spinning with emotions she could not name. This human had nearly died for her. He had risked his ship, his crew, everything he had, just to keep her safe from enemies who wanted her dead. "Why?" she demanded, standing over his bed as the ship's medic worked to save his life. "Why would you do this for me? Why would you fight 3 warships? Why would you bleed for someone who does not deserve it?" Marcus looked up at her with those strange human eyes, filled with pain but also with something warm and certain. "Because you are worth it," he said simply, and then he closed his eyes. And the medic pushed Vera out of the way, and she could only stand there watching as this impossible man fought for his life. He had called her worth saving. No one had ever said that about her before. No one had ever believed it, but Marcus Cole believed it. And he had almost died proving it. Vera made a decision in that moment. Standing in the medical bay of a battered human ship, surrounded by people who should hate her, she would find a way to be worthy of his faith, whatever it took. 6 months had passed since the battle in the Hollow Expanse, and the galaxy had not forgotten the story of a single human frigate destroying 2 Valkyrie. Destroyers had spread through every station, every planet, every whispered conversation in dark corners of space. The crew of the Endurance had become legends, and their captain had become something more. Marcus Cole was now a symbol, a man who had defied an empire and won the diplomatic summit on Taurus. Prime was meant to finalize the peace treaty between humanity and the remnants of the Valkyrie Empire. Ambassadors from 100 worlds had gathered in the great hall of the orbital station. Dressed in their finest clothes and carrying their oldest grudge, Vera attended as Marcus's advisor, a role that had caused outrage among both species. Humans could not understand why their hero would keep a war criminal at his side, and Valkyrie could not accept that their shamed commander would serve a human, but Marcus had insisted. And after everything they had been through together, Vera could not refuse him. The months aboard the Endurance had changed her in ways she still did not fully understand. She had learned to laugh at human jokes, even the bad ones. She had learned to drink coffee in the morning and whiskey at night. She had learned that strength was not about crushing others, but about lifting them up, and she had learned something about Marcus Cole that terrified her. She had learned that she cared for him. It was not a feeling she had ever expected to have. Valkyrie did not fall in love like humans did. Their marriages were political arrangements. Their bonds were about power, an alliance, and mutual benefit. But humans loved differently, loved deeply, loved with a fire that burned through every logical objection. And somehow, that fire had spread to Hirsch. He watched Marcus navigate the summit with growing admiration. He was not a politician, not a diplomat, just a ship captain who had been thrust into a role far beyond his experience. But he handled it with the same stubborn determination he brought to everything else. When Valkyrie delegates tried to insult him, he responded with quiet confidence. When human politicians tried to use him as a symbol, he reminded them that he was just a man who had made a choice. The first assassination attempt came on the second day of the summit. Valkyrie's servant tried to poison Marcus's drink, and Vera caught the man's wrist before the cup reached Marcus's lips. She broke 3 of his bones and held him until security arrived. "You saved my life," Marcus said afterward, looking at her with something warm in his eyes. "You saved mine first," Vera replied. "Many times. I am simply repaying my debt." "Is that all it is? A debt?" She could not answer, because the truth was too complicated and too frightening to speak aloud. The second assassination attempt came on the 4th day, when a bomb was discovered in Marcus's quarters. Vera had insisted on checking the room herself, a habit she had developed after the poisoning, and her scanner had found the explosive device hidden in the wall. "They really want you dead," Marcus observed as security teams swept the station for more bombs. "They want us both dead," Vera corrected. "You for defying them, and me for surviving. Then we will have to keep surviving together." The reception on the final night of the summit was the most important event. A gathering of all the major powers to celebrate the signing of the peace treaty. Everyone who mattered was there, dressed in their most impressive finery. Marcus wore his dress uniform, cleaned and pressed, but still bearing faint scars from the battle 6 months ago. Vera wore a gown of deep blue that sparkled like starlight, a human fashion that she had reluctantly adopted at Marcus's suggestion. "You look beautiful," he had told her before they left, and she had felt something flutter in her chest that she chose not to examine too closely. The reception was tense from the beginning. Velkar nobles glared at Vera with open hatred, while human admirals whispered behind their hands about the inappropriateness of bringing a war criminal to such an event. Then came the moment that changed everything of Valkyrie Duchess. A woman named Sareth, who had been Vera's rival since childhood, approached them with a smile that dripped poison calthine. Sarah said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "How wonderful to see you. Tell me, how does it feel to be a human's pet? His bed warmer, his exotic trophy to show off at parties?" The room went quiet as everyone turned to watch. Vera felt rage boiling inside her, the old instincts screaming at her to tear out this woman's throat and show everyone what happened to those who insulted her. But before she could respond, Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said to Sareth, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Sareth laughed. "A misunderstanding? What is there to misunderstand? You bought her at auction like a piece of furniture. Everyone knows this. What everyone knows is wrong," Marcus replied calmly. "I did not buy a slave. I freed a prisoner." He turned to face the gathered crowd. Ambassadors and nobles and military officers from across the galaxy, and his voice rang out clear and strong. "Allow me to introduce Commander Vera Calthine," he announced. "My wife." The room erupted. Vera felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her 4 eyes went wide with shock, and she turned to Marcus with her voice barely working. "You dare name me your wife?" And Marcus, this impossible, infuriating, wonderful human, just smiled. It was a smile full of warmth and confidence and something that looked very much like love. "Among my people," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "marriage is a partnership of equals. It means I will stand beside you against any enemy. It means your battles are my battles, and your honor is my honor." He took her clawed hand in his soft human fingers and held it gently. "It means you are no longer alone." The Valkyrie delegation exploded in outrage. Admiral Keth Voran's replacement, a younger man with the same hateful eyes, pushed through the crowd shouting about impossibilities and insults and declarations of war, but the human ambassador stepped forward with a smile. Under Terran law, a marriage claim grants immediate citizenship to the spouse. If Commander Calthine is a citizen of the Terran Republic, she cannot be extradited to face charges in Valkyrie space. This is outrageous. The Valkyrie admiral screamed. This is a mockery of your own laws. No, the human ambassador replied. This is exactly how our laws are meant to work. They protect people, even people who have done terrible things. Because we believe in second chances. Vera stood in the center of the chaos, her hand still held in Marcus's grip. Her mind racing to understand what had just happened. He had not just offended her. He had made her untouchable. Why? She whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. Why would you do this? Why would you tie yourself to me? Why would you give up everything you could have for someone like me? Marcus looked at her, and his smile softened into something more tender. Because I meant what I said, he replied. You are not alone anymore. You never have to be alone again. The marriage, that is forever among your people. That is not something you can take back. I know, and you still want this. You still want me? I have wanted you since the first time you smiled at one of my terrible jokes, Marcus admitted. I have wanted you since you saved my life and pretended it was just repaying a debt. I have wanted you since I realized that underneath all that armor and anger, there is a woman who is scared and lonely and desperate to be loved. Vera felt tears streaming down her scaled face, and she did not care who saw them. I do not know how to be a wife, she said. Neither do I, Marcus replied. We will figure it out together. And there, in the middle of a diplomatic reception surrounded by enemies and allies and the shocked faces of 100 worlds, Commander Vera Calthine did something she had never done before. She leaned down and kissed a human. The galaxy would never be the same. The wedding took place 3 months after the summit. On a small station orbiting a dying star, it was not a grand ceremony with thousands of guests and political importance. It was not a spectacle designed to impress the galaxy or make a statement to their enemies. It was simply two people who loved each other, promising to spend their lives together. The station chapel was tiny, barely large enough to hold the 23 crew members of the Endurance who had come to witness the moment. Candles flickered in the darkness and through the wide windows. The dying star painted everything in shades of red and gold. Vera stood at the altar in a white dress, a human tradition that Marcus had explained to her. White was the color of new beginnings, of hope, of starting fresh. She had laughed when he told her this. Among my people, white is the color of surrender. Maybe that is not so different, Marcus had replied with a smile. Surrendering to love takes more courage than any battle. Now, standing in that small chapel with the eyes of people who had once been her enemies watching her, Vera understood what he meant. She was surrendering, letting go of the armor she had worn for centuries, allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way she had never imagined possible. Marcus walked toward her down the narrow aisle, wearing his dress uniform with its faded patches and old burn marks. He had refused to get a new one, saying that this uniform told the story of who he was and how they had met. He looked nervous, she realized with surprise. This man who had faced down 3 warships without flinching, who had stood before the gathered powers of the galaxy and declared his love for her, was nervous about a simple ceremony. It made her love him even more. The officiant was Elena, the pilot who had guided the Endurance through impossible situations and who had earned the right to perform the ceremony through some human tradition that Vera did not fully understand. We are gathered here today, Elena began, her voice warm and slightly unsteady with emotion, to witness the union of Marcus Cole and Vera Calthine. She paused and looked at the two of them with tears in her eyes. I have known Marcus for 15 years, I was there when he lost his first ship. I was there when he pulled children from the rubble of Carvax Prime. I was there when he spent everything he had to save a woman the galaxy had given up on. She turned to Vera. And I have watched you change over this past year. I have watched you learn to smile, to laugh, to care about people other than yourself. I have watched you become someone worthy of the man who believed in you. Vera felt tears running down her face, and she did not try to hide them. There was no shame in crying here, no weakness in showing emotion among friends. Marriage is not about ownership, Elena continued. It is not about politics or alliances, or what two people can gain from each other. Marriage is about choosing someone every single day and saying, I want to face the universe with you. She looked at Marcus. Do you, Marcus Cole, choose this woman? I do, Marcus said, his voice strong and certain. I choose her today and every day. I choose her when she is angry, and when she is sad, and when she drives me crazy with her stubbornness. I choose all of her, the good and the bad, and everything in between. Elena turned to Vera. And do you, Vera Calthine, choose this man? Vera looked at Marcus, at this small and fragile and impossibly brave human who had crossed the galaxy to save her, who had bled for her, who had given her something she had never known she was missing. I do not deserve him, she said quietly, and the words came from somewhere deep inside her. I have done terrible things. I have caused pain beyond measure. I have been a monster. That is not what I asked, Elena said gently. No, it is not. Vera took a deep breath and continued. I choose him, not because I deserve him, but because he makes me want to be worthy of being chosen. I choose him because he showed me that even monsters can change. I choose him because he loved me when I could not love myself. She reached out and took Marcus's hands in hers, her claws gentle against his skin. I choose him because he is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the best thing that ever happened to him. Marcus was crying now, too, tears streaming down his face without shame. Around them, the crew of the Endurance was sobbing openly. Hardened spacers weeping like children at the sight of two people finding love in the darkest corners of the universe. Then by the power vested in me by the Terran Republic and the crew of the ISV Endurance, Elena said, her voice breaking with emotion. I pronounce you married. Marcus pulled Vera close and kissed her, and she wrapped her arms around him and held on like she would never let go. The crew erupted in cheers, throwing handfuls of rice that Elena had brought from Earth specifically for this moment. The tradition was supposed to bring good luck and fertility, though Vera suspected the real purpose was just to make a happy mess later. After the celebration had wound down and the crew had returned to the ship, Marcus and Vera stood alone at the chapel window, watching the dying star burn through its final years. I still do not understand you, Vera said softly. I do not understand how you can forgive so easily, how you can love so freely, how you can see good in people who have only shown you evil. Marcus was quiet for a moment before answering. Humans have a complicated history, he said. We have been monsters to each other more times than I can count. We have waged wars over religion and territory and the color of each other's skin. We have committed atrocities that make the border wars look like a minor disagreement. He turned to face her, his expression serious. But we have also created beauty beyond imagination. We have written poetry and painted masterpieces and composed music that can make souls weep. We have loved each other across every barrier we ever built. We have looked at the worst parts of ourselves and said, we can be better. He took her hand again. That is what it means to be human. Not perfection, not purity, just the constant struggle to be better tomorrow than we were today. And you believe I can do that? Vera asked. You believe I can be better? I believe you already are, Marcus replied. The woman who burned Carvax Prime would never have cried at her own wedding. The commander who killed thousands would never have risked her life to save a crew of humans she barely knew. You are not the same person you were, Vera. You are someone new. Vera looked out at the dying star, its light fading but still beautiful in its final moments. I spent my whole life believing that strength meant never showing weakness, she said. I believed that power meant crushing everyone who opposed me. I believed that love was something for fools and children. She turned back to Marcus, to her husband, to the impossible human who had changed everything. You have shown me that I was wrong about all of it. Strength is standing up for others, even when it costs you everything. Power is lifting people up instead of pushing them down. And love is the most powerful force in the universe. Marcus smiled that warm, wonderful smile that she had grown to treasure. Now you sound like a human, he said. Is that such a bad thing? No, Marcus replied, pulling her into an embrace. It is the best thing I can imagine. They stood together at the window. Two souls from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. Watching a star die and knowing that somewhere out there, new stars were being born. The universe was vast and cold and full of dangers. But they would face it together, and somehow, that made everything possible in the years that followed. Admiral Vera Cole of the United Terran Navy would become a legend. She would defend humanity against threats from across the galaxy. She would forge alliances that lasted centuries. She would raise 3 children who carried the best traits of both species, but she would always say that her greatest achievement was not any battle she won or any treaty she signed. Her greatest achievement was allowing herself to be loved, and in the end, that was the most human thing of all.